who's the pastoral intern at Church of the Redeemer, which is a congregation here in Monroe of the Presbyterian Church in America. So, preacher, if you'll come forward and lead us, we'll certainly appreciate it.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your countless blessings. As your word says, every good and perfect gift is from above. Thank you for the ability to be involved in such useful work and for the honor such responsibilities bear. And thank you for loving us from an infinitely gracious nature. I pray for our commissioners and for the various levels of officials and others assembled this evening. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues they are faced with tonight. Please give them a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting. Please enable them to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement. Please grant them personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them. Please give them an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in our beloved Union County. It is in the name of Jesus Christ I pray. Amen.
Amen. Preacher, we'll let you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you will.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Now we received a request to adopt a proclamation proclaiming September 10th through the 16th of this year as Suicide Prevention Week in Union County. Whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 to 34, whereas in the United States, one person completes suicide every 12.3 minutes, resulting in more than 44,000 suicides each year, per the Center for Disease Control's 2015 data, whereas suicide is the only leading cause of death in the United States that has increased every year for the past decade, whereas it is estimated that there are over 1.1 million suicide attempts each year, and whereas in 2015 North Carolina experienced 1,406 deaths by suicide, and whereas over 90% of the people who die by suicide have a diagnosable and treatable mental health condition, although often that condition is not recognized or treated. And whereas suicide results in an estimated $51 billion in combined medical and work loss costs nationally, and whereas suicide results in an estimated $1.39 million in combined medical and work loss costs in North Carolina annually, whereas the stigma associated with mental health conditions and suicidability works against suicide prevention by discouraging persons at risk for suicide from seeking life-saving help, and further traumatizes survivors of suicide, loss, and people with lives experience of suicide. And whereas organizations such as the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention envision a world without suicide and are dedicated to saving lives and bringing hope to those affected by suicide through research, education, advocacy, and resources. Now therefore be it resolved that the Union County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim September 10th through the 16th, 2017 as Suicide Prevention Week. And Tina Busby, I believe you're present. All right, if you want to come forward, we'll go ahead and present this to you. No, it's really up to you. We'll go right up here in front.
Thank you for this. Thank you. I feel like I should shake your hand. Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. From my heart. Personally. Thank you. Oh,
turn right around there and sure.
Hey, ladies. Thank you,
right
Lynn. She helped me do this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
On three. 1, 2, 3.
Do I keep it for you?
You do.
Thank you.
It's yours. All right, can I get a motion to adopt that proclamation, please?
Motion to adopt proclamation.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. All right, and that will take us to public hearing. CZ 2017-001, Waxhaw Nixon. We'll now open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, given the number of speakers, I would ask that we limit it to 3 minutes per individual speaker, please.
All right. We have a motion to limit the speakers signed up here to 3 minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None? All right. Mr. Matthews.
Does the 3 minutes include me as well?
We'll allow you as much time as you need.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman and Commissioners. What we have here tonight is a conditional rezoning request called the Waxhaw Nixon property. I'm going to give a brief introduction. We have the applicant here who's going to give a presentation. Obviously, there's many of the people from the public here who might want to speak on that. I have some of our staff members from the planning department here to answer questions if I can't answer them. And also the chairman of the planning board is here if there are any questions for the chairman of the planning board. I also want to make one point of clarification. In the background information in the agenda packets, there was information about the project, but there was a stream of emails, and one of them some of them included information about what was called the Torrey Path Railroad closure, railroad crossing closure. That was in a chain of emails, but that has nothing to do with this request. And I want to make that clarification that we're not here to discuss the railroad crossing closure. That will come at some point in time. We're working with Waxhaw and the NCDOT on that, but that has nothing to do with this request tonight. That was just part of the chain of emails that was in that background. So let me start off by just giving you some information about the project. It is a conditional rezoning request, 27.5 approximate acres from R40 in the county to B4 conditional zoning. What that means is that the plan and specific conditions will apply to this particular development if approved. So it's not a use by right rezoning, it is only on conditions. This is a site plan just showing the general layout of the project. What you've got here is this is the largest building, which is approximately 75,000 square foot. You have multiple other buildings here in development areas, and then it's surrounded with parking and access. There are 2 access points. This one is intended to be a signalized access, and that could stay depending on what happens with Highway 16 and any widening that occurs, but it is planned for a signalized intersection. There are 2 other access points for adjacent properties shown, one here, adjacent property here, and then one on this side for the adjacent property on this side. Future development could actually show that this would be redeveloped maybe at some point in time in the future, and that would provide some access to get to this signalized intersection. And then there is some additional property here, which is also unincorporated Union County. That property has not come in for any type of development proposal, but there may be some way to incorporate access at some point in the future for that as well. Just to kind of give you a little background, it is surrounded pretty much by Waxhaw. The white is the unincorporated area for Union County. This is the property here in question. As you can see, that was the property I was pointing at earlier before. This in front of here is still the town of Waxhaw. Just the development status, this is undeveloped at this point in time. It's really open. Land use plan. So the current land use plan for the county actually shows this as mixed residential. Now it's in between 2 of our commercial nodes. This is a neighborhood center, this is a community center. And our plan actually calls for, in an area that's mixed residential, that's between 2 nodes, that commercial development is appropriate. What level of commercial development, that's really what we're going to be discussing. It can be less intense or more intense, and I'll talk a little bit about Waxhaw's development plan as well. Just to give you an idea of the existing zoning in the area, this is a normalized zoning. So it's not, these are the categories, but just to show you that in red is actually some type of commercial or office zoning for the property. Again, this is mostly Waxhaw's jurisdiction, so it's their zoning that you're looking at. To see the actual zoning codes, that's here. Again, you can see this is zoned, that's that piece that's Waxhaw, it's zoned commercial, this is commercial. These three little parcels, which they look to be residential, but they actually have some commercial zoning on them here. Same thing in this area here, this has commercial zoning on it. Office, institutional, or retail is generally what they're called out for in the Waxhaw zoning. This is just a site to show you any wetlands that we currently see or streams that are on there based on our actual plans and aerials. And then last but not least, just to show you some current traffic counts that are on the roadway, which is Highway 16. There are plans for widening of Highway 16. However, that is some time in the future. If I'm not mistaken, right-of-way acquisition is to occur sometime in 2023. It could go faster than that. It could go slower than that. It really kind of depends. They're wanting to combine, my understanding is there are two projects along here. They're wanting to combine those two, but this would be the second leg of it is my understanding on there. So there is plans for widening of Providence Road, Highway 16, but it could be several years off from that. Again, the developer is here. He has a presentation. At the end, I'll come up and I'll talk about the staff's recommendation and certainly answer any other questions you might have that may come up during the rest of the meeting. Are there any questions that I can answer for you at this time?
Vice Chairman?
Yeah, Brian, can you go back to one of your first slides that showed, and you made a comment that this is part of the unincorporated. How far does unincorporated go?
So this and this white area here is still unincorporated. So
Okay.
this is unincorporated, this is unincorporated, and this area here still shows it's unincorporated.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's not scaled out to show you the entire area, but that's what we show at this point in time.
And additionally, how far going up Providence Road towards Charlotte is this property from the Waxhaw city limits?
So Waxhaw city limits are all around this property here. This
Well, I
is all.
understand. But how far, I'm trying to understand how relative this is to Waxhaw. Is it dead in the center of it, or is it?
No, sir. So it's not dead in the center of it. What you have here is just below here. You will have the downtown area where you have the downtown. Just above here is where you'll actually have the Lowe's and the Harris Teeter and that shopping area. So it's kind of in between the downtown and that Lowe's home and improvement shopping area. I wouldn't say it's dead between them, but it's very close to being
Several
centralized.
miles up to the city limits.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Not several miles. It's several miles in between the two. It's several miles in between the two, between the downtown and the city
Okay.
limits.
All right.
Any other questions?
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Matthews.
All right, so any other questions for the board right now?
No.
Again, I'll come back up if you have additional questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name's Stephen Rosenborough. I'm with U.S. Developments. We're the applicant tonight. First, I want to say I don't follow Facebook, but I'm told on Facebook it says we're trying to bring a Walmart. We are not trying to bring a Walmart to this site. There's a Walmart up the road, and I can guarantee you Walmart wouldn't duplicate another site down the road. We started last August by meeting with staff to see what the long-range plan for the county was. We determined, working with staff, that B4 for commercial was the right application, and that conditional would allow both the county and us to bring forward the specific recommendations that we would require. We looked at annexation into Waxhaw. We looked at their mixed-use plan. We felt that bearing in mind the county's current water use requirements, that more high-rise, mid-rise residential would not be applicable, and that would generate more traffic than what this site will. I want to thank the time that Waxhaw spent with us. They recommended some tenants to us, and we're pursuing those options. We held 2 public meetings. We held 3 meetings with Waxhaw staff. We held numerous meetings with county staff and 4 meetings with DOT, of which both the county, not all of them, most of them, the county and representatives from Waxhaw were involved in the conference calls that we held. We also spent some time with the Economic Development Director for the county to understand what your requirements or desires with respect to commercial taxes are. We understand that and I'm just using approximate numbers, I may be off by a point or two, but we were told that you're approximately 17% commercial industrial, and your target would be closer to 40%. We have a report, and I apologize that I have to pass it out. I don't have it in electronic form. If I can. Copy for each member of the commission. What this does is look at retail drainage, and in this case, in Union County, there's significant drainage into Mecklenburg. Over $500 million of sales is estimated to leak out of the county. There really is only 2 options, as we saw, for retail in the county: Highway 74 and Providence. I'm sure you've been up Providence to the new development Waverly at Providence and 485. Whatever the leakage was, I think it'll be really extended with that, because that's major retail that is being developed there. We estimate that the property taxes would generate would be approximately $200,000 annually, over 200 jobs, and the sales tax would be over $1 million. And this is without any incentive we're asking for from the county. So we think from an economic level of activity, it's significant. Dale Stewart will come up. Dale's the president of Land Design, to talk about the plan in more detail. And also discuss stormwater. There's been some discussion about stormwater. The requirements of the county, which we will fulfill, as we understand it, are more rigid than those of the town, and Dale will explain that. Chris Borst, our land development manager, will talk about the traffic issues. We've worked closely with Barry Moose. Some of you may know Barry. He was the divisional engineer here, and he's prepared all of our TIA reports. Unfortunately, he could not be here tonight. He has to be in Raleigh for other meetings. I'll be happy to come back and answer any questions that you may have, either now, Mr. Chairman, or at the end. Is there anything that I can answer
Any
now?
questions at this time?
Not this time.
No. Thank you.
Then I'd ask that Dale Stewart come up.
Be fine.
Thank you, Stephen. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I am Dale Stewart. I'm with Land Design. We've had the pleasure of working with the county staff for this past year in evolving not only what Stephen described as the sort of the direction and the tenor of the master plan, but more importantly, all of the elements that we have, I guess, addressed as we've come along, beginning with what I would call those conditional uses. And this conditional plan gives, as Stephen said, both sides the opportunity to decide what are the best uses that are compatible not only with this site, but with the vision of the county and what you're willing to allow to be built on this site. I think that's the advantage of having this conditional use plan come before you. I'm just going to take a few minutes and run through this presentation. This is, in fact, the street view in front of the project. You can see while there's an existing sidewalk there, and I'll mention a little bit later in our response to some comments, we know that the future widening is probably going to disturb that, and there's some definite preferences by Waxhaw that we have heard, and so we want to address those. But I just want to kind of run through this. Advances. that's okay. Got it. Got it. I'll just use it. So I think we all understand where the site is located. I wanted to just stop for a second on this existing conditions, and of course you can see the residential that's on the rear of the site. The two meetings that we had with neighbors, certainly we heard some of the concerns about visual and noise and light and so forth, and we want to talk about that for a couple of minutes. But the thing I wanted to point out is that there is this natural stream drainage feature that comes right up through the gut of the site, and there's a significant elevational difference between this drainage feature, the rear of the property, and then from NC 16. And so part of this process that we've been through with the site plan is not only the uses and not only the configuration, but also how we might actually wind up, realistically developing the site. And that sort of informs how drainage may work and also how grading may work. And while those plans have not been prepared, we felt it was important, and we've worked with staff to think about, well, how might we do that? And I want to speak briefly to that. One of the things that we had is we had a wetlands consultant specialist actually come out, go through a delineation process for the site. That delineation was then verified and confirmed with the Corps of Engineers. And so one of the things I'll mention later is that part of our commitment, and I'm bringing to you some new commitments that haven't been in the plan, that have come out of some of the comments that we've had this week. As we continue to listen to the comments, we're willing to continue to make the commitments that we hear are important in terms of the development of the site. I think Brian's already addressed the local land use plans around it. This happens to be the land use plan, which shows some commercial use in the corridor. This has been sort of that trend of the NC 16 corridor. This is the site plan. The site plan depicts some uses that border. There is an additional right-of-way dedication that's indicated on the technical data sheet that's going to accommodate what Brian mentioned is the future widening. Then an additional 40-foot setback before you get to any land uses, and then the major use. And you can see what we're doing here is we're trying to take advantage of this natural topography and locate not only the preserved area around the stream, but also that's where primarily stormwater erosion control during construction, and then stormwater during the permanent stormwater quality features would be located, so that the site drains naturally to those areas. So on to what we have heard just this week about things that were of interest and concern, and these are from Waxhaw specifically. We may not have gotten all of the concerns, but we've tried to respond to the ones that we did receive. So one of the requests, was to install a 6-foot sidewalk along the entire frontage. Crosswalks is applicable at intersections. And I'm listing these as additional commitments that are not currently in the zoning documents that we're willing to commit to. Certainly we would work with Waxhaw. They've got the sidewalks on either side. We would do some coordination with them. And we would also try to attempt to locate this so that future widening doesn't come right behind us and then tear up the sidewalk. One of the things that's been concerned that we heard was about buffers. I've got some diagrams that I want to go over briefly with you, but there is a specific buffer requirement that's on the technical data sheet that it actually requires an S2 high profile screen as opposed to just a Class C buffer. And so what we're saying is we're going to enhance the normal buffer beyond what's actually already in the zoning documents as an S2 high profile screen. And I want to just read this so that everybody understands what the commitment is. The S2 high profile screen is intended to be used in those instances where physical and visual separation is needed to buffer high intensity land uses and site features from lower intensity land uses. The S2 screen requires trees, shrubs, and ground cover plants that form a continuous visual barrier at least 6 feet in height, in addition to other aspects of the buffer. The next thing was some concern about erosion control and stormwater management, and Stephen mentioned that we had looked at these standards, but we felt like it was important that we state that if we determine during the design process that there is some difference between Union County and between the town as it relates to, stormwater, how they might implement that, or our erosion control, we're going to look at the more protective measures and abide by those, and that's what this commitment suggests. Just to note a few previous things, we've already committed, as we showed in the site plan, there's no parking between the buildings and the street. There's just this continuous street frontage. We have previously provided a detailed schematic that's inside the rezoning package that was presented to staff and has been part of the public record. We've also and continue to commit to avoid impacts to wetlands, because we've already gone out there and located them and we've confirmed where they are, and also to preserve the stream buffer that's required around those buffers. And then I think it's clear, but we wanted to state emphatically that we are committed to all of the off-site roadway improvements as are ultimately defined and decided by NCDOT. So very quickly, the concern here is what's going to be the relationship between the developed area and the adjoining properties. And so we've developed a few cross sections, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is that the grading strategy is going to be that we need to bring material to the street side of this so that the buildings that are along the street relate more visually and access-wise to 16. And therefore the idea is that we're going to lower the grade in this area, which you can see here, which will depress these buildings lower than, and this is an actual section through the existing residential units. So this is that buffer we're talking about, and then this is the visual lowering of that relative to these, so that the idea is that you're really looking over these buildings, and then you've also got a screen, and then there's going to be a 6-foot fence that's going to actually line the entire back of this facility at the base of this section here, so that you've got that fence. There was some concern about security, so that fence would line the entire back of the center, and then you would have this additional screen and buffer, and then the elevational difference. And so we've just simply gone through and cut a few sections. In this case, this was a 2-story building, and this is a 3-story building. Again, we lowered that building height as it got closer to the residential neighborhood, and then so those are the 3 cross sections, and you can see each one of these we've lowered that grade below the existing neighborhood. So with that, we hope we captured some of the more recent comments and then have added these commitments, and we're certainly still here listening to all of the comments, and hopefully we can favorably respond to those as we continue our process.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Stewart at this time?
I have a question for Mr. Rosenberg, if I could ask.
All right. Mr. Rosenberg? Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Earlier today, after looking at some of the emails that we've gotten over this and some of the concerns from the area, I've been talking with Aaron Kirkpatrick with Union Day School, and they've been looking for approximately 20 acres to build a new school. The issue is with this site is that you've asked for certain things, and when we have a conditional use zoning, you have to ask, you have a list of conditions, and in your list of conditions, school or things like that wasn't included on it. So one thing that we can do with this is to address community concerns, is ask you as the developer to add to those list of conditions before anything's done. And of course, because there's opposition tonight, you wouldn't see any action on this for at least 2 weeks until our next meeting. So I would ask that that you consider to add on to the conditions of use, school, construction, library, or other public use. By adding those, not only could a school be constructed there, but it's a potential site for a library in that area. And that would address some of the concerns, I think, that are coming out of that area. And it would also put it probably back closer to the commercial that was planned, or in Waxhaw, some of Waxhaw's planning, which I think was about 30 to 40,000 square feet, maybe along that front. This would address some of the issues of high-density housing that have been proposed there, and some of the other stuff as well. I know that I think Mr. Kirkpatrick was in touch with you today,
Yes, she called me.
and I think their board is going to meet Friday or this week sometime.
She told me as soon as possible.
Okay, and that would give you some time to work with her and see what kind of interest is there, and before we make a decision on anything. Are you willing to do that, to add those to your list?
Yes,
of
sir, we're
conditions?
willing to add each of the items that you specified.
Okay, and I think what we'd also need along with that would be a traffic impact analysis, with the school being there rather than the large section of retail.
We did one preliminary one this afternoon, and that does reduce the traffic. What's interesting, again, I don't follow Facebook, but I understand there's some discussion about a big box. The reason we started with a food store, actually a food store generates a lot more traffic than a big box, and that's why we reduced the use, so to speak. A school would reduce it even further. We did a very preliminary this afternoon after I spoke with the chairman of the school board, I guess she's referred to, just to see what that would do.
Also, I think that our staff would need a revised site plan, just showing that. I guess the site plan that you have here would need to show something with where you would locate a school. I'm assuming it'd be pretty much the same area as the big.
It would be.
area.
Yeah, in fact, if we can come to some agreement, if they get back to us this week, we could have that, both the TIA redone and the site plan within the 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Rosenberg? All right, thank you, sir. That will take us to those individuals wishing to speak. We'll start with the Mayor of Waxhaw, Stephen Mayer. Reminder, you do have 3 minutes. Please come forward, state your name, your address, and give us your position.
Steve Meyer, Mayor of Waxhaw, 8,000 Kew Gardens Court, Waxhaw, North Carolina. Before I get started, I want to offer an apology to the county commissioners. I understand you got a letter from someone today with a board, an advisory board title on that. They don't represent Waxhaw. Only the Board of Commissioners represents Waxhaw, and we apologize that it came and gave that impression. So apologize for that. I'm going to have to get through this quick. This thing goes by the wayside because we saw more changes on there that we've never seen yet. This was all new news to us today. Commissioner Helms, just so you know, it's 3.2 miles to Bonds Grove and it's 1.5 miles to Maxwell's, as your question. We acknowledge and respect the process you're going through here. The challenges of growth, the difficult economic challenges of striking a balance between the resident and commercial tax base that's needed for citizen services is a tough balancing act. We live it. I have to tell you, it's much pleasant experience to be on this side tonight than on that side because those decisions are very tough, and we know that. Crux of the issue here is this directly abuts the Camberley neighborhood, an established 148 single-family residential community built in 1999. This is a classic donut hole. Definition of a donut hole or enclave, it's surrounded by another jurisdiction, namely Waxhaw. This is phenomena something the state legislature is wrestling with and trying to establish some legislation around. We get to experience it firsthand. Senator Tucker established a Senate bill this year trying to come to grips with how do we get around this, because these are tough issues. So respect that. We also hear all the time that Waxhaw, we're tired of your growth. We've been working hard on establishing some growth management plans. By no means are we done. We struggle every day with the homes, and we're still checking off the list of the homes that have been approved since 2004. That's right. The majority of what we're living with were planned use developments that were approved back in 2005, 2006. So we take everything one day at a time and try to make this a better place. If this request would have been presented to Waxhaw, at least the one that we are allowed to review, we would have conveyed, and we have been conveying, and it would have been great to see those plans a little bit ahead of time so our staff could react to it. We would have conveyed that this does not conform and is significantly inconsistent with Waxhaw's growth plan. Across the board, all of our plans. The use for commercial zoning is inconsistent. It's not about necessarily just the use, but it's density and intensity. And while, yes, our residential does allow for some higher density townhomes, that use and that density is far less intense than any commercial you're going to put back there. We would not allow for a store, a school to be 20 feet from a residential community. I don't care what buffer you put there. That's a problem. I won't go through all the roads. I won't go through the transportation issues. Suffice it to say, we have a very stringent TIA ordinance. There's a reason for that. We've lived through the problems of Highway 16. This goes through as is. You're encumbering the town of Waxhaw with several $1 million in additional cost in both transportation and walkability and public safety. I don't take that lightly. I hope you don't take that lightly. And perhaps the solution here is to pause and take a step back and really look at what really is happening here and what's the best use for all of us, because this is a tough problem. Don't envy your position, but I would ask that you respectfully consider what Waxhaw is experiencing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Emerson? Doug Emerson?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Doug Emerson. I live at 3719 Sandberry Drive in Waxhaw, North Carolina, in the great county of Union. I'm neither for nor against this project. What I was concerned about, which the voluntary annexation. Back in the 90s, I was annexed by the town of Waxhaw on the last day of the fiscal year, and I had to pay for that whole year. So on one hand, when I heard that, you know, it's all voluntary now, I was going, yay, great. But now in a situation like this where we're having major development come to my town, you know, I don't know how it works now, but we may not get any tax money from it. So, you know, I feel like there needs to be some way, if this gentleman wants to build in our town, that, you know, he either goes ahead and comes into voluntary annexes into town, or is there some way we can get some money, because I'm sure this development's going to cost us. And, you know, to everybody's, you know, they think that I'm a millionaire, but I like to retire in Waxhaw. And if, you know, none of these people are made to come in, or made to be annexed into our town, you know, the people who are in town paying the taxes are going to pay more and more. So I hope you all would help me out with this problem, or the town itself, and make a motion, if you do approve the project, for them to be voluntary annexed into Waxhaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann McManus?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ann McManus. I live at 2116 Majestic Poplar Drive in the Camberley subdivision. I've been a resident of Union County, and most specifically Waxhaw, since 1989. I went to school at Wingate University. I did title searches on the sidewalks that come up Howie Mine Road into Waxhaw. At the time, I was working for David Lee. I have come to love Waxhaw. I live there because I love it, because it has heritage, because it has beauty, and because we do not need more commercial development. I have grown to enjoy the beauty that's there. I'm able to walk from where I live in Camberley to the town of Waxhaw. I walk to the library where it exists now. I have grown 2 sons in Union County. One graduated from Parkwood, one from Cuthbertson. We have contributed to this place, and it's a beautiful place to live. We have development currently. We have graded land. We have vacant commercial property that's not being used. And I would just respectfully ask that you consider that. I do know that you have an important decision to make here. I understand that growth is inevitable, but let's be smart. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Mark Chadwick? Mark Chadwick?
Hello, Mark Chadwick, and I live at 4005 Garfield Court in the big town of Waxhaw. So here we go. Originally, I was to speak about how no one of you will be impacted by this development or the rezoning. How an elementary school, middle school, and 2 high schools use 16 to transport our kids to and from school every day. How the current traffic on 16 on Saturday and Sunday has increased tenfold in the last few years, and this will only make it worse. How documented widening of 16 only goes from Ray to Cuthbertson, Kensington for the financial year 2021. Nothing about Cuthbertson, Kensington to that location or beyond. Instead, I have questions and concerns. The 27 acres in question for rezoning is R40, correct? The new zoning that's being recommended is the B4. My observation is this: if you are voting on this zoning tonight, why is there a sign on that piece of property from the Chambers Group with the phase accelerating retail success? Reviewing the Chambers Group website, for those attending tonight who don't know who the Chambers Group is, their mission statement reads, and I quote, "The Chambers Group is a commercial real estate firm committed to representing and protecting retail champions. We believe in being a warrior for our client, always fighting to keep the client's best interests at the forefront while standing behind biblical principles of integrity and trustworthiness." Again, the first sentence says it all. The Chambers Group is a commercial real estate firm committed to representing and producing retail champions. So my question is this a done deal? Have we the people have no voice? Has an agreement been made prior to this meeting tonight between you and the voted commissioners of Union County with the U.S. Development LLC or the Chambers Group? If not, why does the Chambers Group think this land is already Zone B4? We the people demand to know why. We the people need to read, hear any and all emails, lunch talks, and or phone calls made between any parties involved with this rezoning. Until these documents are released to the public and easily found, at minimum, the zoning should be delayed. If you are truly voted for by the people, you will vote no. Thank you.
Pat Kitto? Pat Kitto?
Yes, my name is Pat Kitto. I live at 7802 Waxhaw Highway. I live in the county, but my heart is in Waxhaw. I've been here 52 years from Southern California, and I saw all this going on out there in the 50s. And it's all about money. And I'm sorry, I think that it was a very bad choice of a spot to put anything. And when the gentleman got up and showed us, it would have been much better, and I know it's my fault for not coming into the county and looking at the map of that, but he didn't name any of the streets, and that would have been so much better. But I'm really against it. And I appreciate your listening to me.
Thank you. Ann Simpson?
Hello, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ann M. Simpson. I live at 2517 Trading Ford Drive in Waxhaw, North Carolina. And I'm here tonight to ask you to vote no on the rezoning petition of the 27.5 acres in Waxhaw. This property is nestled within an established residential neighborhood. Although the developer has done their due diligence and, as required by law, notifying the abutting residents, this project will impact not only the surrounding subdivisions of Deerfield Plantation, Camberley, and Kingston, but any Waxhaw or Union County citizen commuting on an already overcrowded 2-lane roadway. Those impacted should be given an opportunity to voice their concerns. Construction and widening of Providence Road is not scheduled to begin until 2023, which is 6 years from now, and adding the proposed warehouse, store, and office buildings will only contribute to an already narrowed, congested roadway, which will create hardships on those residents living in Camberley and Kingston while they try to navigate to and from their homes, even with the addition of signalized stoplights. Lastly, there's a genuine public safety concern as this parcel is zoned under Union County, which means it falls outside of the town of Waxhaw jurisdiction. While that's beneficial for the developers since they don't have to adhere to the town of Waxhaw's ordinances, it places consumers, employees at the property in jeopardy because they need to rely on and be required to wait for Union County Sheriff, Fire, EMS, should there ever be an emergency, or even though the Waxhaw Police Department is located right across the street. So thank you for your time, and please vote no.
Thank you. Martin Lane.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm going to try to. What's this? I've got a minute. Come on now. I get a reset, don't I?
You got 3. Go for it.
I'm going to try my best to shoot from the hip. These are my notes here. When I first found out about this, I spoke with somebody and asked why they wouldn't annex into the city, and was told that they were asked to annex into the city, and the response was that they did not have a good relationship with the town of Waxhaw. I was on the town board when they annexed previous property into this town of Waxhaw, and I'm happy to share with you that relationship, but I've got a few other things to get through here. If I've got time, I'll get into that. This U.S. land, when they did come in, they annexed about, I want to say 50 acres. It's where the White Oak nursing home is now. There's still 20 acres over there. It's under Waxhaw Commerce LLC, which happens to have the same mailing address as U.S. Development. So they've got 20 acres in Waxhaw to develop. 20 acres for a school, 20 acres for whatever. They've got a commercial development. If they can't unload that property there now, what makes you think they can unload this property here? They've had that property since 2002, 2003. On the U.S. Development website page, U.S. Development, acquire, rezone, develop, manage, and sell. That's what it says. It also goes on to say that as the principals, they're used to having hard dollars at risk, which leads me to believe that they're going to try to make us believe that they've got skin in the game. Maybe they do. They certainly have a lot more money than I do. I assure you that. But I live there. My house is right there. I can see it on this map. That's my son. I've got skin in the game. He's got skin in the game. I've been in this community for 20 plus years. I know most of you guys. I know most of these people. This is my town. Stephen's going to buy this property, develop it, sell it, and leave. It says so on his website. I've got to live there. I'm raising a family there. I hope my kids can raise a family there. When I was on town commission, I would have people come up and say the exact same stuff that I'm saying, and I hated it because they came in, they say, oh, not in my backyard, we don't want it, and they would give no good reason why they don't want it. I'm that guy now. I don't want it. I live there. My kids live there. My kids play. My son wrote down, he said, be sure to tell them we play in those woods. Not my woods. They may be his woods, and there'll be a fence go up. But that's my town. It's my home. These people don't live there. I do. I'm raising a family there, and I plan to continue to raise a family there. This is going to make it real tough for me to stay and raise a family there. Not only that, but it's going to make it real tough for me to sell a home there if I've got these giant stores behind there. 2 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. James Reese. James Reese.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is James Reese. I live at 2137 Majestic Poplar Drive in Waxhaw. I want to talk a little bit about tonight's meeting. My wife and I have numerous concerns to share regarding the proposed development. We are strongly opposed to any development as our backyard borders the proposed development area. First, we are concerned about the light pollution and noise pollution that will invade our privacy in our backyard. This will also have a negative impact on our property value. We have been told that a membership warehouse store is being considered for development. The warehouse store is not appropriate for this location. Truck traffic, along with noise and pollution, is a concern. Many warehouse stores have gas stations on their property. This is a residential area, and the gas station would bring with it many safety concerns. Even with the proposed addition of a traffic light, Providence Road traffic will continue to be a major problem. This will directly affect the Camberley residents when making a left turn into the neighborhood and the left turn out of the neighborhood. Turn into our neighborhood, is already a problem. The proposed stoplight will make a total of 4 stoplights within a small span of Providence Road. Is this what the residents of small town Waxhaw want to see? We need to preserve the historic Waxhaw for our residents, our visitors, and our future. The additional traffic that is proposed development would bring a huge safety concern. Depending on the time of day, traffic has become a nightmare. Safety vehicles and ambulances need to be able to maneuver along Providence Road in a timely manner. My mother-in-law lives in Kingston on Providence and was recently transported by ambulance to the hospital in Monroe. Bumper-to-bumper traffic along Providence Road needs to be addressed for safety of our residents. Additional commercial growth in the proposed area will hinder our safety. Commercial development of this type needs to be constructed away from residential areas. This stretch of Providence Road cannot handle the proposed development. Thank you for your attention to these concerns and your consideration of them. Please vote to stop this proposed development. Keep it out of our backyards. All right, backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan McWhorter.
Good evening, folks. My name's Dan McWhorter. I live at 201 South Providence Street. I'm a Waxhaw native, and my family has been in Union County and Waxhaw for over 200 years. And I got a big stake in this. I've got a lot of family, I got a lot of friends that are not here tonight, and they're all against this, and I'm against it, and I'm asking you to be against it. We don't need this in Waxhaw. Over the last 2 decades, Waxhaw has been overbuilt, and it's not the current administration. I'm not putting all the blame on them. But since the late 90s, anything goes. And I drive to Charlotte every day for work, like a lot of people do. It takes me an hour and 15 minutes to get to my office. And then in the evenings, I try to get home any way I can. But this is a disaster for Waxhaw. They don't need this. They don't need any big buildings. I mean, at this point, you don't need to add anything else. We've got vacant property waiting for buildings. Why allow this? This really, I think it should be a Waxhaw issue, not the county. That's just me. But Waxhaw is being overbuilt, and nobody I know of that I've talked to wants this, plain and simple. And I'm asking you guys tonight, think about what you're doing to the western end of the county down there. It's destroyed. You can't even get up and out of the road. You can't even enjoy your life, and this will add to it. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
I believe it's Linda Vanderhecht. Oh, I was close.
My name is Linda Vanderleest. I live at 2149 Majestic Poplar Drive in Waxhaw. I have only been here about a year. Moved here from Dallas, Texas. Wanted to get away from the big city life. Don't put me in the middle of it again. If I'd wanted to live in the big city, I'd have moved to Charlotte. God help us. But you butt right up to my backyard. There is no way even a 6-foot fence is going to protect me from whatever you're going to have on the other side. Put a park there. Do something for the community instead of pulling us together and trying to make us buy something that we don't want. We don't want that. We need something for the community, not for big business. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Waters.
My name is Stacy Walker. I live at 3700 Bentley Place in Waxhaw, North Carolina. I am asking you guys to please deny this request. I live in Kingston, and I want to raise a family here. I live out in Waxhaw to get away from Charlotte. I don't want to be on top of all these commercial businesses, safety, air pollution, and just the quality of life. If we allow this, what else is going to come up in the area? It's going to be a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Abbott? Abby? I'll let you announce it.
My name is Kathy Abbott. I live at 2074 White Cedar Lane in Kimberly. In this article, it states that residents in the area were given notice about meetings. I never got a notice about any meeting because I would have been there. One of my concerns is the traffic. I work in downtown Charlotte. It takes me an hour to get 20 miles. It takes me about half an hour to get down to Ray Road. If you put this in there, it's going to make more traffic, and that's at 6:30 in the morning. One of the other concerns I have is that it talks about connectivity to adjacent parcels. Does that mean that they're going to put a road in from this area into Camberley to cut through? I am opposed to this, and I would ask that you not vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. James Johnson.
Hi, my name's James Johnson. I live at 2424 Trace Creek Drive in the Camberley subdivision. I'm on the tip of the very back of where this development would be. And a lot has already been conveyed of my thoughts as well. But I think everyone that is against it is just simply saying that we are going to bear some of the brunt of that given the traffic and all the things that have already been said. But we just want it developed responsibly and thought through some of these things. We're not against development of some commercial things. We don't want to go all the way to Waverly or places like that necessarily. It's just this is nestled right in between all of our residences, and therefore, because of that, we know the impact that's going to have on us immediately. So everything's been conveyed already with the traffic issues, but we want to keep this area primarily residential is our goal, because we are really only a mile from Waxhaw downtown, and we're only a mile or so from what already sits a piece of property that we drive by every day and see. I've lived there 11 years now, and this particular property that is graded has been sitting there about 7 years, I think, and nothing is developed on it. So we're just asking the question, what's going to happen to that land then that now they're wanting to develop, and why now with that when the other isn't developed as well?
Thank you. David Lambert.
Good evening. I'm David Lambert. I live at 504 Cold Springs Road in Wesley Chapel. I used to live at 3605 Sanbury Drive, which is in the Waxhaw city limits. I lived there for 17 years. I have watched Waxhaw continuously grow. I've lived at 504 for the last approximately a year and a half, though. The seal behind you guys says planned progress, and if you guys allow this development to happen, I just can't see this being planned progress. The infrastructure for the town of Waxhaw just simply isn't there, and as a lot of people have further addressed, there's a lot of cleared lots that are already there. And along Pine Oak Road, there's an open lot there as part of Prescott Village, which has been there for several years. And back in the early 2000s, a developer named GS Carolinas went bankrupt trying to develop that property. And that property was sitting on what was considered a floodplain. And my concern with part of that property that they're trying to develop here is that they're trying to develop some hilly their property is very hilly, and part of the property, once they got that all leveled out, is that it wasn't compacted, and the fact that it didn't compact, they couldn't build on it for several years. So when the economy went boom in the 2008, 2009, and they went bankrupt, that left that property blank for all this time, and it's still blank. And we also have the property by Alma Village, which is also blank. Furthermore, Mr. Matthews spoke about the road widening project at Providence Road, and he talked about land acquisition and taking in place in 2023. I mean, that's just land acquisition. Along to go with land acquisition goes with the environmental study impacts that has to go with that. And it's going to take at least a couple years for all that stuff to take place. So yes, you get land acquisition that begins, then you have the environmental studies that go with that. So then you're talking about road construction that's probably not going to begin until probably 2026. So, and that's not even on DOT's radar as I know it as of yet. The only thing I see on DOT's radar right now is the Ray Road construction project. So I'm just speaking out against this, and I just hope you guys will consider that. And I just echo everything everybody else said here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Richard Miller.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the commissioners for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and for the developer for presenting their project tonight. I moved into the Waxhaw, Union County area 14 years ago, fleeing the Matthews crushing growth that was occurring there. It was a quaint community then, and since it's more than doubled several times. The traffic has become unbearable. Now, when I moved there, I was under no illusion that the property that was right behind us wouldn't one day be developed. And I fully expected that. But I also expected that that development would be in character with the rest of the community. And that if there was planning and zoning that would go along with that, that the county would work in coordination with the town. And that's what's lacking here, is a little bit of coordination between the town and the county. I think one of the things that this commission needs to be very aware of is that if Waxhaw as a community grows and if it's a quality place to live, it adds to the value of the county as well. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for quality of life in our community. And right now with the crushing traffic, it's a safety concern, it's a quality of life concern. So please keep these in mind as you make your decision. Thank you.
Mark Katz. Good.
You know, I've heard a lot of my neighbors here say a lot of things that I was going to say, so I'm going to cut to it. Bottom line is, I live at 2033 Trace Creek Drive. I shoot a gun, straight bullet, it's going to hit that pond on that picture right there. I'd like you to take these letters for myself and the 4 other houses to the left of me and to the right of me. Gentleman that just spoke is the only one I don't have it from, which gives specifics which you can all read through later. But basically, planning boards, you know, I'll preference this by saying I'm a carpetbagging Yankee that's been down here for 15 years, but I'm the original owner of the property. And my family's commercial real estate developers in the Northeast. I've been to plenty of these planning board meetings trying to convince residents that something should be zoned this way or that way or whatever. Bottom line is here, I think everybody's pro good development. This is horrible development. This neighborhood, Camberley specifically, has already been impacted majorly when the school, Cuthbertson, we were gerrymandered out of the school district. We were fortunate enough that our kids were juniors and seniors, so they were off to a better place, but I saw a significant property value immediately once that happened. This will cause a second significant property value. The bottom line is, planning board commissioners, planning boards are set up to protect the rights of the citizens and to assure that along with development, that the citizens of the community's lives are not directly impacted by any changes in zoning laws. The change in the zoning status from residential to commercial now is unequivocally going to have an economic impact, number 1, and quality of impact life, number 2. And I hope you all strongly consider that because it is your duty to protect the citizens of the county from that happening. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Brady.
gentlemen. First off, I have been a resident of Waxhaw for 17 years. I live in Alma Village. And also, by signing that document, I didn't realize I had to speak in front of people tonight. But anyway, there's nothing I can say to you all that hasn't been already addressed. And I would just like to say, ask you if this is actually a smart decision, if it makes sense, because for me, it's a quality of life issue, as it is for everybody else here in this audience tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry now, you're going to have to help me out here. Candace DeFinis?
Hey there, my name is Candace DeFinis, and this is my son Colton, and we live at 8313 Willow Branch Drive in Waxhaw. He wants to be able to see you guys. We've been sitting in the back row. So I want to be very clear. I live in Curitan, but this affects everyone in Waxhaw. So that's why we're here. That's why he's up past his bedtime. This is not consistent with Waxhaw's future UDO that is in draft status. This is not consistent with what the residents of Waxhaw want. And this is just not consistent with the vision of heritage, activities, and well-being of our town. So we respectfully request that you deny this. I would, however, be in favor of a school or a library, something that benefits our community for years to come. You know, I've been a resident of Waxhaw for 9 years. He's hopefully going to be a resident of Waxhaw for much longer than I do. I will be. His grandparents relocated here to be a part of his life, and there's many, many, many generations of folks that moved to that moved to Waxhaw for a quality of life. I can say that I have stood before the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners many times, and I have asked that we preserve as much of the land that we have in Waxhaw as possible. And I'm asking you guys, please deny this. This is just not what we need. It does not help us. It does not help our quality of life. It does not help the brand that Waxhaw is trying to become. And it doesn't help with people's, I feel bad for the people that live close by. I mean, it's going to affect them greatly. And I can honestly say that even though this isn't in my backyard, I don't agree with it. Thank you for your time.
Earl Cook.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Commissioners, staff. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Earl Cook. I live on Denholm Drive within the municipality of Waxhaw, and it's my goal tonight to leave you with a very positive image of Waxhaw. First of all, I know that you have an extremely difficult job managing growth throughout Union County, Western County especially, and Waxhaw is kind of the epicenter of that growth. I'm not opposed to growth, not opposed at all, but I do want to see it managed and consistent. I recognize that this is a very time-sensitive issue for the developer. But I also want you to know that Waxhaw has worked very hard for well over a decade to manage and cope with the growth problem. Such things as updating the Unified Development Ordinance, creating a form-based code for downtown, developing small area plans, very specifically the Highway 16 corridor plan. Waxhaw entered into the Main Street program and is an award-winning town throughout North Carolina in the Main Street program. We've used consultants consistently, and those plans that have been developed have all had a great deal of community input through charrettes, public meetings, and things. The comprehensive land use plan, I was privileged to sit on that steering committee for over a year. The very first thing we did was ask for 15 copies of the very recent Union County comp plan so that we could try to be in sync with Union County. We recognize that we're part of something bigger. So after doing all of that, a lot of good things seem to have happened. Now I want to use 3 examples. I think you have a soft copy and a hard copy to demonstrate what all of these people have been talking about. And here comes the positive image of Waxhaw. I don't want to talk about specifics of traffic and things, but first of all, before you have a hard copy of something that designates Waxhaw throughout the South, beginning in Oklahoma, across Texas to Florida, up the coast through the Carolinas, back through Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. It lists the 10 best towns in all of the South to raise a young family. I am proud to say, when you get to the back page, you'll see that number 1 is Waxhaw, North Carolina, and it lists the reasons why. That's quite an accolade to receive national attention, that Waxhaw is the best town in all of the South to raise a young family. That hasn't happened by accident. The second article for a positive image you have before you, a very recent article in the Charlotte Observer, and I want to read you just a small portion of it. That's not me. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, just a moment. Oh, I see, it is me.
Correct.
I got your signal, Mr. Chairman.
I got you
Just
1 minute.
30 seconds. Just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Queen City, Waxhaw is a small country town that holds tightly to its roots while catapulting full force into the excitement of the future. Over time, this sleepy farming suburb has transformed into, quote, the heartbeat of Union County with its diverse array of local shops, vibrant restaurant scene, and pedestrian-friendly stress and beautifully preserved historic character. Much more than simply a place to call home, Waxhaw is a true destination. And very quickly, my third one, international recognition for Waxhaw. Lufthansa, a premier airline, flies internationally throughout the world. Each month, they feature one particular international flight. I couldn't help myself from snapping this when I looked inside their in-flight magazine. And on the second page, you'll see all of the flights around the world that Lufthansa flies. And this magazine was in every one of those flights. And it says, International Route of the Month. This month, Lufthansa flies 7 times weekly from Munich to Charlotte, North Carolina, North Carolina's biggest city and a major U.S. banking center. Visitors can explore charming neighborhoods such as North Davidson Street Arts District, NODA, and the Waxhaw Historic District. How many people knew that Waxhaw was recognized in Munich, Germany? This doesn't happen. And the whole point of this conversation is that we want to retain that feeling of being a welcoming, historic, quaint, family-friendly, charming town. And we can do that. We want to proudly display our heritage, activities, and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that will conclude the speakers that have signed up. And Mr. Matthews, I believe you had some closing remarks.
That's a hard act to follow there, Mr. Chairman. I did want to actually just go through a couple of things on the request, just so that the board has that information. The planning board did hear this on July the 11th. There was a 3-3 tie. There was not an actual vote in favor or against as far as their actions go. And they did not have enough members to get one way or the other, so it was a tie. I wanted to make you aware of that. Just wanted to specify some of the conditions that are in the plan. Again, I'm not sure if the board intends to make a decision tonight or not, but I want you to be aware of them. If the request were to be approved, the 75,000 square foot building is designated as only a discount club. I need to make a clarification of what that is. That means a Sam's, Costco, BJ's. That is not a Target or a Waxhaw. That is specific, a Target or a Walmart. That is specific to how traffic is generated. So that is a condition, cannot be anything other than a discount club. Also, all traffic improvements will be required by NCDOT. The developer did state that earlier. Right-of-way is being set aside for the widening of 16. The developers agreed to that. Also, to be aware that the site plan, all reference conditions on the plan and other express conditions will apply. So the plan itself is a condition that if it were approved, that needs to be clear. Also wanted to talk a little bit about Waxhaw's plan. If you could bring that screen back up for me, I just want to point to something here. And this leads to sort of the staff's recommendation on this. In their comprehensive plan, they show this as a G3, I think it's called an intended growth sector. It does reflect some commercial development along 16. The balance of this shows as some type of residential, whether that's multifamily, apartments, townhomes, but it shows that as residential. This is estimated to be somewhere, I believe, between 30 to 40,000 square feet of retail, office, commercial use. And that's what I understand their plan that has been adopted shows as far as that goes. We certainly did take a look at that and doing our staff recommendations. And one of the things we try to do in our staff recommendations is look at all the different plans and things that you have to deal with. You just had a report done by Wingate not long ago talking about the balance in the county. The fact that we're about 83% commercial industrial and about, 83% residential and 17% commercial industrial. That balance is way out of whack. It can and will put pressure on the county over time. Also the fact that we have a significant amount of retail leakage from the county going into Mecklenburg County and other places. We're losing those dollars going into other counties. And then also when it comes to residential, residential does add additional burdens to our schools, and it also adds new vehicles on the road. While commercial may generate trips, they don't create new vehicles. Residential creates new vehicles. Now, again, this all led to a staff recommendation for the project. Now I want you to understand that both Waxhaw and the county's plan reference that some commercial is appropriate on this site, whether it's 30,000, or there's 150,000, or 200,000, some level of commercial is appropriate on that site. What we're really discussing is intensity, what this board feels is appropriate on this site. Certainly there's been valid concerns expressed by this. This is a tough decision, and again, I wanted the board to be aware of how we arrived at the recommendation we came with. I think the developer has expressed that he will meet some of the conditions that the town has expressed in a previous email. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have related to this project.
Any questions, Mr. Simpson?
You mentioned the intended growth, the G3. And it was that email from Waxhaw town staff that kind of got me thinking about the impacts.
Mm-hmm.
If I understand this correctly, their allowed uses for mixed use includes housing types of apartments, townhomes, duplexes, single family, assisted living, and light industrial with up to 12 units per acre. And then the residential piece could have up to 8 units per acre. So if they fully built that out based on what I see from the town of Waxhaw, they could put almost 240 houses on that same site.
And that could be the case. Obviously, Waxhaw would have to determine what level of intensity they would want to see on that site. But their plan does call for certainly a more intense use of that in the residential side. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, in going through the response or the notes that they sent over, and you had responses back in red,
yes, sir.
Is there anything that the developer did not agree to from the town of Waxhaw's requests?
I would actually more defer to the developer on that. I believe all the requests that we're aware of, they met. The sidewalk issue, I believe the mast arm signalized intersection, I think they agreed to that. The stormwater, that issue. The issue about annexation, obviously, they did not meet that request. And they could still, if they wish to. That's the only one I'm aware of that they did not specifically agree to. Now, as far as intensity, that's a different matter.
And my understanding, one of the concerns that one of the residents brought up was the response from police and medical.
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding as well that we have a reciprocal agreement with the town of Waxhaw to be able to provide services?
That is my understanding. Now, that's not my expertise, but it is my understanding that there are always agreements between the municipalities and the county when it comes to response. I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, the town would not want to spend its resources responding to a site that they're not generating tax revenue off of. Being a former town manager, I recognize that absolutely. But it's my understanding there is an agreement when it comes to response if necessary.
I'm a firefighter from Waxhaw Fire Department. Can I address that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
He's a firefighter from Waxhaw. Can you address that?
Do it quickly, yes.
I would just say that, you know, that would be within our response district, so yes, we would respond to that.
Thank you.
Can I ask him a question?
Yes.
Do you have a ladder truck that'll handle a third-story building?
Sir?
Do you have a ladder truck that would support a third story?
No, we do not have a ladder truck.
Okay.
Commissioner Simpson, are you done?
I am for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rushing?
And I think I might can answer Commissioner Simpson's question. Spoke to the sheriff this morning because that was a concern that I had seen in an email or from a citizen. And he said that, yes, that mutual aid agreement, they would absolutely take care of that. And what would happen is that they would have jurisdiction there just like they would have in the town limits, and that they could arrest, they could do whatever they needed to do. I do have a question of, I think Steve's still here, if I could ask the mayor or somebody from the town staff. Anything that he said inconsistent with because that's the concern I have is in looking at this, our water situation, other situations, there's a concern with more residential. Is that the plan? Is that what Waxhaw has in your plan would be residential?
We have no plan for this site because we haven't looked at it from the county standpoint.
Okay.
Plan that was presented today was dramatically different than what our staff had a chance to look at. I'm going to address a couple things. I think there was a discussion on stormwater, and the consensus was ours, stormwater erosion control, et cetera. I think there's a note from the county saying ours is much more stringent, and so should abide by that, regardless of what goes in here. That, and I think you guys recognize that. On the front, there's no question, Brian is exactly right, that there is some commercial. We all agree that there's some commercial. On the front part, though, it does get to intensity and use, and one of the things allowed in this plan that we would not allow is drive-throughs up front. You could put up to 4 drive-through restaurants right up in the front, which would put an additional burden on traffic. I don't know if it's new vehicles or old vehicles, but it's vehicles going through there. That would be a challenge for us. On the police side, it's true. We will respond to a call. We will not patrol that area, though, on a daily basis. So you got 1,000 cars over there. That's on somebody else unless there's a call made. And we will handle the call up until the time that the county sheriff gets there and then turn it over. Flip side of that is somebody has vandalism or whatever, they would probably walk over to the police department to file the complaint because that's not considered an emergency response, et cetera, and so we wouldn't handle it. So it's not as simple as would we cover or wouldn't. Yes, we get the mild jurisdiction, and I get that, and obviously our police officers would respond to the appropriate situation. That goes without question. Dennis, was there any more? I have Dennis Rory, our Director of Engineering Services. Was there anything else? And I appreciate you asking the question, giving us a chance to respond.
Dennis Rory, Development Services Director, Town Engineer for Town of Waxhaw. I wouldn't describe significant differences. I would say the site plan, it's new information, so we really haven't had an opportunity to respond to the site plan that we saw today. And there's some elements about it that we would otherwise appreciate the opportunity to have feedback on it, just so that we could have that in for the record and for consideration. I would also offer that, to my understanding, the traffic study that had been submitted to NCDOT hasn't been approved at this point. So it's a little bit concerning from my perspective just to hear that all of the commitments have been made to a traffic study, to my knowledge, that hasn't been completed. So I just want to make sure that feedback is offered. But we'd be happy to look at that traffic study. We'd be happy to offer feedback as well, and work with the applicant if they would like to work with us on any of that.
I think where I look at it is, if the plan is to do mixed use, commercial and residential by the town, if you took in and annexed that property, and you did, and basically we'll be taking it out of our hands and putting it into your hands. And from what I hear from your citizens, that's not what they're interested in either. And that's what I looked at when I started reaching out to Union Day School, was that the concerns of having a retail butted up against a neighborhood, a large retailer, a box, a price, what do you call it? Discount club, those types of things. I don't know that that's the right fit, maybe, but this is an opportunity for us to discuss that with our conditional use ordinance. Just like your issue with not allowing a drive-through, that might be one of the things that we asked Mr. Rosenberg also to look at, is requiring that there's no drive-through as part of that conditional use. I think we can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
But if we have a situation where we can lock that in to be a library, a school, I think that would address my concern for the residential behind, if it were to be annexed into Waxhaw. And it would also be an amenity. I think somebody asked about an amenity to the town. We do have a library plan for that. A bond was passed, a $10 million bond was passed for that. And we have to start looking for the location for that library. And you know, it fits a lot of uses, but still allows for that commercial corridor that you guys were planning for already.
So two things. I think the point is that we don't know what we don't know. We really haven't collectively studied this and looked at it and say, what's the right mix of commercial to residential mixed use, whatever that may be. Commissioner Simpson threw out the number of 250 plus to the maximum. Yes, I don't think anybody in Waxhaw is looking to add 256 units at this point in time with some of the other things that we have going on. The point is, we have to look at it, and you have to, I get your 83-17, we're sitting at 92-8. So, you know, I get the problem that you're facing as well. The other thing I want to mention about traffic, one of the things Waxhaw did, and we get the target is on commercial out in the Western Union County. We did the hard work and put in place a traffic impact analysis ordinance that's tougher than the counties, and it's by design, because we're going to have to eat a bill for about $2.3 million at Cuthbertson and Kensington, because that wasn't in place. We got another one we're eating at Gray Byram, and another one at Bonds Grove, because that kind of stuff wasn't done in the past. That's why we are very strongly suggesting that maybe we pause here and do the more stringent traffic impact analysis, so we really know what's going on. We know how DOT does it for an individual site based upon yours. We know how they do it for ours. There's a discrepancy there, and what we found is we end up, if we didn't apply ours, we end up paying significant seven-figure dollars. That's what the town gets worried about in terms of encumbering. You've got an intersection at where the food line is. You have a proposed intersection and cut through where the Oaks is. You have a light that is going to go in somewhere, and a right turn lane going down by the bridge. This is a congested area that we are really trying to get our arms around. And so as an additional one, that's where we do disagree, or we do have a difference in terms of the intensity of the traffic, regardless of what the use is, the intensity of the traffic. And we put a far more stringent look at that very consciously because of what we're facing.
Union Day School is on 16 now, is that correct? Or right?
No, they are on Kensington.
Right at Kensington. How far away from this site, approximately?
That would be approximately a mile.
Mile away.
So it's at Kensington and Cuthbertson, about a mile, and then down a quarter of a mile.
In Waxhaw.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Commissioner Jerry Simpson?
Go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to bring, Commissioner Rushing made a good point, and I wanted to reiterate that. The board, in a conditional zoning process, you have the ability to negotiate with the developer, the applicant, on things that you would like to see, that maybe the town would like to see, and come up with a project that most, maybe not all, could possibly be happy with if you choose to approve that. It's not a yes or no. You don't have to turn it down based on its current merits. You have the ability to negotiate. I don't know what that looks like. Those may be things that this board has within its own mind, or things that have been mentioned by the town already. But I do want to stress that you have that ability to do that. In the process, however, both parties have to agree. So the commissioners can certainly say, this is what we'd like to see, but the applicant ultimately has to agree to it in order for you to move forward. It's not a matter of, this is what we want, no, I don't want to do it, we're going to approve it this way. It has to be a mutual agreement. But I did want to make sure you were aware you can make those negotiated changes.
Thank you. Commissioner Simpson?
Brian?
Yes, sir.
Could you just briefly comment on the public notice process?
So public notice process by statute, first off, we have in a conditional rezoning process, we have to have a community meeting that has to be held. That notice goes out, I believe, at least 10 days prior to that community meeting. At that point in time, the adjacent property owners and usually a little bit larger boundary are notified that there's a community meeting being held. It's really the developer's meeting. It's not the county's meeting, but the statutes require that to be held. We attend it because we're there if there's questions, but it's not our meeting. There were actually 2 meetings in this case. They held more than one, and that was because there was a change in the plan, and the plan we felt necessitated that they have additional community meeting. On top of that, there's then a planning board meeting. The planning board then has what's more of an informal meeting. It's not an official hearing. We typically try to send out notices to adjacent property owners of the planning board meeting to, again, allow them to come if they speak if they're necessary. We try to send those out 10 days, again, prior to the planning board meeting. And then finally, you have what we have tonight, which is a public hearing, which is the official hearing. And again, we have to notice this in the paper, and we also have to send out notices to adjacent property owners. So that's the process for public notice on the property. We also post a sign on the property which has the case number and a telephone number if someone wants to call and ask questions about it.
Any further comments, questions? Vice Chairman? Thank you.
They did the rule like they were supposed to, but it doesn't really help the whole neighborhood, which is 148 houses, like you guys have said.
Thank you.
Certainly. And that is correct.
All right. Vice Chairman?
All right, appreciate it. First of all, your comment on not having a ladder truck, that's a county expense that'll be required, so I want to point that out. My biggest concern is the roads being able to handle this volume. I would like to see, before we have to vote on this, the traffic study that shows the various volumes that come back. I actually sit on the board on CARPO, which we schedule. We're part of the scheduling process. I say that loosely because I'm not so sure that we can say we do that, because this past Wednesday night, $100 million was taken out of our bucket for Iredell Union and Mecklenburg County and was put on one project. So that's $100 million that we've got less to fund our roads. If this is 2023 when they're going to start right away, you're probably looking at a total of 10 years before you have roads that'll be able to handle this kind of traffic. So that's an extreme concern. And you know, Mr. Rosenberg called me. We had a very good conversation, and that's not the first time you've heard that. I expressed that to you when we talked. But I would like to see, we also talked about water runoff. Your diagram here shows maybe it's a spring head going down through, or is it a dry creek? I'd like to have a little more understanding of that before we move forward. So that if you could put that together and get it to us before we meet again, I'd appreciate it. But I have an extreme concern, and I've heard it mentioned several times tonight. Union County is part of a bigger community. Yeah, as you mentioned, you know, Waxhaw is a part of that, and I think we owe Waxhaw the consideration, because it's three miles down to the city limits, and so.
It's 3.6 to Bonds Grove, it's 1.5 to Maxwell.
Okay, 3.6 to Bond Grove, that makes it pretty much consider, but also the lady from Curitan, when she spoke, you're gonna be impacted by the traffic worse than the people that live behind the neighborhood, because it's just gonna continue to grow. So I've got extreme concerns about the roads to be able to handle this. I'll tell you, I think you've got a beautiful plan. The site I have a concern about. I think that plan, if it was at a different location, I might support it completely, because I think it's a very good plan, and it's true. We've got an 87% residential, and we need to fix that, but we don't need to fix that balance and break the balance of our citizens to be able to move around the county. I mean, I'm a lifelong resident, but I've been back almost 20 years. And in the last 10 years, it takes me longer to get to 485 than it does to go to Charlotte. So, you know, the first question I get from any one of our citizens is, what in the heck are you going to do about the roads? Well, we have very little control of that. Steve's on that same board, and we go through the same frustration. This vote to give $100 million away, we had 12 people vote against it. One person raised her hand and defeated us all. So I've got extreme concern on the roads, but if you can give us some information back, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Rushing?
Thank you. Can I ask the developer, can I ask some questions?
Sir.
Have you just had discussions with Waxhaw about annexing in the past this property?
I'd like to be really clear on a couple of things, Mr. Rushing. We have met with Waxhaw. We have never been asked to specifically annex into the town. Okay. That includes the previous town manager and the current town manager.
Has there ever been an offer made by the town of Waxhaw for?
No, there hasn't been an offer, but it's been pointed out to me that if we did annex, the town bylaws give the opportunity for a bonus density. So I took that to mean that there would be an opportunity to increase the density.
There was mention of a 3-story building. Any 3-story buildings planned for this?
We have one office building that's 3-story.
3-story. Mayor, how many stories is the Navant building and the police building?
3.
Both those are 3 stories. I think I've been in the police station. I didn't know if it was 3 or 4. I thought it was 3 or 4, but it's 3. It's a 3-story building. If anything inconsistent, well, I mean, does he say anything inconsistent with your knowledge of this property or the bylaws?
Discussion about annexation units. I was in the meeting with the current town manager, and the suggestion was made that if you desire to annex in, you would welcome to have that discussion.
Okay.
I mean,
and again,
annexation is voluntary,
right.
so we have to be very
right. You can't annex in order.
Previous town manager did the same thing.
Okay.
Because Dennis was in that meeting, so
okay.
obviously misinterpretation, but we have to be very careful in what we say because annexation is voluntary, as you guys all.
Any other 3-story buildings in town? Just at least we know those two.
Can I clear up a question also that you had asked earlier on the school? I think you need to keep in mind that today, yes, the question is Union Day and city limits for town limits. It is, and it's a student max capacity right now of 425.
Right.
You're talking about building a school that goes not just to 4th grade, but all the way up to 12th grade. And so
I thought they were K through 8. Are they not?
they plan to go to high school. So we haven't seen their plan,
Right.
but you have to factor that in, at least in future planning in terms of traffic. So just throw that out there to say, make sure we factor in not where they are today, but
Right.
where they plan to go, whatever.
How do you feel? I mean, how do you feel about that? Because that's new. I mean, that's today. I mean, that's this morning. The Union Day in the library. We just started discussing that today, or having any thought about it. He's not approached anybody. No, I think in the past that.
We can't comment because we're
Right.
currently in litigation with Union.
Oh, okay.
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 Mr. Lance Simpson?
Can you speak to, Mr. Mayor, do you mind, can you speak to the comments on the bonus density? Was that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't think I was involved in the bonus density piece. That could have been a conversation with the previous town manager. I may not have been present.
Is that consistent with bylaws that you have on the books?
It's consistent with the direction that we've been considering with our new unified development ordinance that we currently have a draft of how can we look at different sort of density bonuses as a way to entice individuals to voluntarily annex. So real quick clarification, the Caroline's Healthcare building is also.
Just 3 stories.
So if I understand your statement correctly, if he voluntarily annexed into the town, you would allow a developer, and one of your incentives would be greater density?
So that is a policy direction that we were moving towards. We've now got to a draft form of an ordinance where we're considering that, and that still is open to a lot of public dialogue and discussion.
Policy hasn't been approved.
Yeah, whether or not that ordinance will get adopted in its current form. So I can't sit here and say that's exactly what we'll do because that particular document has not gone out to public review.
One of the concerns that I've had, and I've heard from all the residents, is traffic. And if I understood correctly, when I went to the planning site, excuse me, there are approximately 2,000 units under consideration by the planning department. I think it's phase 7A, 7C for Millbridge, phase 8 for Millbridge, 450 units off of one of the roads, and then another 150 apartments down there in downtown Waxhaw. So approximately 2,000 residential units going in south of this location. And if I understand it right, the biggest impact is going to be this commercial development. That's my concern, is that there's a lot more residential going in than what this one site could hold at any one time.
Yeah, I don't think you've heard, either one of us have spoken, conveyed that this would be the biggest traffic impact. I think we conveyed that it would be a traffic impact. I think something that we also conveyed or communicated was that we have a town traffic impact analysis ordinance that is more restrictive to the state's requirements. And so if this site were to run through a town process, we would review the traffic on the merits and basis of the town's traffic impact analysis ordinance, which could yield different results on how to mitigate for increases in traffic. So I just want to clarify that we haven't conveyed that this would be the biggest traffic issue, but we did say that this would have a traffic impact, no doubt.
That would be, I would like to see the traffic impact study come back. I really am curious to see what NCDOT recommends overall, because my concern is the overall traffic. And if we were to follow the town's UDO, it would increase the density from a residential standpoint and increase the traffic flow from what I'm looking at and based on what your town planner sent over, that I think would be a greater impact than this development. But I want to see the impact study to understand it.
Mr. Chairman.
Just to respond to, nobody said that this is the largest impact, but what we're dealing with is a bunch of plans that have been approved from the past that we're living with. Millbridge, you mentioned. 2002. I live right across from it. I get politely talked to from my neighbors almost on a daily basis about that. It is a challenge that we're trying to figure out every day. We just got approval, as Commissioner Helms knows, for a study along the Waxhaw-Marvin corridor to try to figure out, get in front of that kind of stuff. But these are things that pop up that we have to address.
And I'm not critical of Millbridge. I mean, that's something that you are working through, but it does add impact to the Highway 16 corridor. And with your current plan, you also add, your plan calls for apartments, multifamily units, even light industrial on this same site. So when I look at the overall, what you have on the books, I don't know what your new UDO will end up looking like, but your current one shows pretty heavy use on this site as well.
Just real quick, the Millbridge development that you referenced, it actually has an approved traffic study that's attached to it that calls for different mitigations for the various phases of development. So it's not being built without any sort of kind of traffic law or how to mitigate that traffic. There was an approved traffic study from years ago that is still covering that particular development.
No, and I don't mean to hang it on Millbridge. There's a bigger issue when I look at the growth from the town overall between where you were 10 years ago and I think what you're projecting 10 years from now. It's, I believe, 3 times the amount. So it's the long-term issues that you're having to deal with. That's why I really would be curious on the traffic study to see how that comes back.
Mr. Simpson, the traffic study is complete, and we'll be happy to get that to you. It has been provided to DOT. One of the analysis that's interesting is that the main intersection is Cuthbertson. Under what they call an as-built with these improvements that'll be made, we go from a from an F to a D. Apologize, I'm not a traffic engineer, but it's an improvement of that traffic. And again, as a commercial site, we don't generate traffic. And that's a big reason why when we met with county staff last August, we decided not to come forward with any residential request. The Waxhaw zoning bylaws that we were showed clearly show a bonus density as one of the options for annexation. Yes, the mayor's quite right. We were asked that they would entertain annexation if we wanted. The question was, were we asked to? The answer is no. There's no gas proposed. There is no road connection to the residential proposed. The Chambers group was referenced. They know clearly that it's R40. One of the biggest things that concern me, our changes to the plan that are spoken about tonight were based on the request by the town of Waxhaw. We have not moved a building. We have not increased the square footage. We have not changed the turn lanes. We have not changed the light. So the only changes we made were in direct response to 2 emails provided to us by county staff that were sent to them by Waxhaw staff.
Commissioner Rushing?
One of the things one of the speakers spoke of earlier was it seemed like this was a done deal. And I think that's what, to Commissioner Matt Simpson's point, is that regardless, there's been proposals to change what's there, whether we change it under Waxhaw's plan or Union County's plan, and then, or even what we put there. If we put a library there, that would be an amenity to the community. If we put a school there, that's an amenity. Even if we did go with a school and it was annexed in, until the legal issues are resolved, that's even a problem there. So, and I think they're wanting to open up maybe within a year. This, I don't know if everybody knows, this is not a done deal tonight. This is not a vote tonight. This goes on for a few weeks. It can go on for how long, Ron?
As long as you want to.
So I think,
based on tonight, it might be a long time.
So I think there was some things put out on the internet that and emails that everybody thought tonight was the night to show up because it was all done. Tonight's the night to get your voice heard. We've heard your voices. We've seen emails from the people that are not here. I think we've taken that all into account. And I want you to know that I don't think there's a commissioner up here that's not sympathetic and desiring to come out with the best outcome for everybody in this. And whether it's we don't look at it as we're trying to hurt Waxhaw. I'd like to help Waxhaw. That's why we voted to build a library in that area. We supported the bond to do that. We're looking to do good things for Waxhaw and work with Waxhaw. And I hope that y'all really understand that. It's a tough thing to come up here and have to go through all this, but you know, we're not fighting each other on this. We're not fighting you on this. We're just trying to come up with the best solution for everybody. And I can tell you, I would rather lock it in as a library, school, or even commercial than having a lot of residential put in that place there, because the residential does generate new cars, and this wouldn't. Not only that, it'll put us further behind. If it's more residential in the back than it is commercial in the front, it would put us further behind in that split that we have. So, you know, I think that you'll realize, you'll see as this goes through, this is going to be well thought out. It's not going to be rushed through.
All right, any further questions for Mr. Matthews or Mr. Rosenberg?
I have one question.
Ma'am, we've entertained public speaking. Please have your seat. Commissioners, do you have anything further? Ma'am, would you please be seated?
Is anybody else wanting to know that explanation?
Do you have any further questions for Mr. Matthews or Mr. Rosenberg?
I just want to recommend one thing, if you don't mind. Generally, it's been the commissioner's practice to close the hearing. Given, though, that we've got a lot of debate and a lot of discussion here, I would certainly recommend that you continue the hearing, you establish a date that you want to continue it to, and that way we can continue the dialogue and the debate at the next scheduled time instead of closing the hearing. That would just be my recommendation.
Fine, thank you. Any further questions? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission.
Thank you. Anybody want to make a motion that we leave this open?
Make a motion, we leave it open.
All in favor of leaving the public hearing open?
Chairman,
Yes,
you need
Counselor.
You need to continue it to a certain date and time.
All right, what date would you like?
The next meeting, we
What is
need
that,
to.
September 18th?
18th.
18th? All right, we have a motion to leave this public hearing open until September 18th at 7 p.m. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. All right, thank you. All right, that will take us to our informal comments, which no one has signed up to speak. Therefore, I will entertain a motion for an addition, deletion, and/or adoption of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. That'll take us to the consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Motion to accept consent as presented. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. All right, that will take us to our new business.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint Patrick Harrison to the planning board to fulfill the unexpired time of a regular member.
All right. We have a motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. And that will take us to the county manager's comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Akins. I have one brief comment to share with the board and for those who are in the audience or who are watching at home. Earlier today, Commissioner Helms asked for an update regarding Union County's preparation for any potential threats from Hurricane Irma. Given the recent news surrounding the Houston flooding situation, we thought it was timely to give folks an update on what we're doing with this possible storm. For our area, in particularly, flooding and power outages could be our greatest impact. As you all know, weather-related events can change quickly, and as information is provided, we will also provide the most accurate and timely information to the public and to the Board of County Commissioners as needed. Just to give you some update on a few of the things that staff are working on, our emergency management staff are currently monitoring and sharing information from the National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service, and State Emergency Management daily briefings. They are sharing those with all of our executive staff and with local first responders. There will be a briefing with first responders and EOC, that's our Emergency Operations Center staff, Friday morning, depending on Irma's path as we receive those updates. Emergency management, school officials, energy representatives, and the DOT officials are discussing potential impact and action plans. We are also ensuring that all of our generators are checked, fueled, and ready for deployment. As more information becomes available, we will also pre-stage and prepare designated emergency resource trailers and equipment. Staff is also working on our EOC operational schedule with all of our staff, and our emergency services staff are designated for 12-hour operational periods for any staffing that's required. We've also double-checked our emergency county on-call list to ensure that we have accurate information. Earlier today, our public information staff sent out a preparedness media release highlighting items residents would need for an emergency kit, along with other important preparedness information. Residents should also know that they could download an app, readync.org, that provides updated current Union County emergency information on shelters, power outages, road conditions, and other relevant information. Additionally, residents should register with our Code Red alert system through Union County Emergency Management or our Emergency Communications Center. You can go to unioncountync.gov, and under our latest news, it will give you the prompts to register for this important alert system. And that's all I have tonight.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jerry Simpson?
No further comments.
Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would just like to send out prayers to the family of the Weddington High School student who was tragically killed in an accident this week, and just be with the family.
Commissioner Lamb Simpson?
I had no comments.
Vice Chairman?
I would just like to say thank you to our deputies that give us the protection in the evenings, and it's an ongoing thing that we really do appreciate it, and thank our staff for the work they've done. Brian and your staff have given us good information. We appreciate it.
And with that, I have no comments, so I'll make a motion we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.